Are you full of health and wellness information yet struggling to implement into your daily life? Or do you have your health sorted out but struggling to integrate it with your other areas of your life? We've surveyed a number of Wellness Couch fans and recognize that this is the biggest challenge that most of you face in daily life. How do you turn your knowledge into action and a lifestyle? Enter the Wellness Breakthrough. For 3 days and 2 nights in February, 8 of your Wellness Couch favorites are gathering in Melbourne for one incredible event, and we just have 3 spots left. Entry to the Wellness Breakthrough is by application only. To apply, simply go to thewellnessbreakthrough.com. And apologies in advance if you apply and we're all sold out. TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we're talking about reflections and intentions for the new year. So Happy New Year, Jules.
Yes, thanks. Happy New Year, Bridget.
Yeah, so, wow, I think so much can come up for us around the turn of a year. I don't know about you, but I always sort of look back a bit on what's happened. And maybe not with a lot of, I guess, kind of intention in the past, but this year I've really tried to go back and look at, you know, what worked, what didn't work for 2015, and then also have a bit of a think about what I want for the year ahead. And so I thought that it'd be a really great podcast to do on this topic because, you know, you go on the internet or on your Facebook feed and there's seriously 1,001 articles around New Year's resolutions and do this and do that. And it can be all a little bit overwhelming. So we wanted to talk today a bit about throw out the resolution idea because I think traditionally resolutions can often be kind of almost punishment based, where they almost set you up to fail and then you're kind of beating yourself up 3 days in when you're, you know, not exercising every day or you've eaten that, you know, sugary treat that you told yourself you weren't going to touch. Instead, I'd love to talk about it a bit in terms of how about we look at, you know, all the things that worked for you in 2015 rather than the things that didn't work or that you want to change. Because when you're building on the things that worked, you know, and you're basically setting yourself up for another 12 months of more of those things that work, I mean, you're setting yourself up for this great trajectory of success, I say in inverted commas, as opposed to this, you know, starting the year feeling like that you're lacking something and that you've got to change something because in the past you didn't do enough of something. You know what I mean?
I'm 100% loving that. I've never been this intentional. That's why when you brought this up and I thought, oh my gosh, from your coaching background, I thought this is gold. I really need to know this because I'm the same when I look back on my year, which I think we all do at that turning point of a new year. I don't look at it with intention, and I've never thought of breaking it down, as you just said, into what were my successes that I carry forward and build onto in the new year. I've never thought about it that intentionally, and I'm loving that. I
think too, you know, we often have, like, our brain tends to have a negative bias, so we're always looking for the things that didn't work. That's just naturally how we're, you know, wired. But once you start going back and, like, you know, even like listing, you know, getting a blank piece of paper and listing 25 things that worked for you last year. And that really, it buoys you to see that you actually did do some great things and you did, you know, build some relationships that were important to you, or you did put into play, you know, some kinds of initiatives that were, you know, that were inspiring to you, or you did achieve, because we so often think about what we didn't. And then when you start to train your brain to see all the things that you did do successfully, then it opens up that kind of inspiration to do more of that kind of thing. So that's what I've been doing a little bit of, and because you can so easily look at the things that you didn't do well enough. You don't get caught up on what wasn't done well enough.
I think that's what I've always done. Now that you're really pulling it apart, I think that's what I've always done. And you're right, a New Year's resolution has always been based on what I haven't done in the previous year that I think I should be doing.
Yeah. And
which is crazy.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, if you go and, especially if you're going to go and read, like, you know, all those articles that talk about resolutions and setting them, you can often start to inject the values of whoever's written it into you and think, oh yeah, that's what I should do. Even though for the 365 days leading up to that, your life has not demonstrated that thing that's on this person's list is at all important to you. You know, it's absolutely crazy to try and think that you're now going to magically change your behaviour from the 1st of January and go and do this new thing. Like, it's, you know, it's kind of futile, I reckon. Unless you've got a big drive to do it. A lot of people fail at it. So instead, focus on what worked and build on what worked.
I like your idea of a list of 25 things that really worked well for you, or that you got a huge amount of, I don't know, would you say gratitude or inspiration from?
Yeah, and I think things that you found yourself in flow. And perhaps,
so talk about that. What does that mean, being in flow?
Well, being in flow is almost when you kind of lose track of time. You find that things just work. So perhaps you are working on something, or that you're, expanding an area of your life, and you're finding that all the right people and all the right information just seems to be coming in at just the right time for you to integrate what you're seeking or what you're learning, and it just almost has an effortlessness to it, because that's also a reflection of what's working. If the people are around you, or you're making all the right connections for your next step on that learning or discovery, that's a form of flow. That's a form of reflecting that, yes, this is a path for you. This is something that's important to you, because everything's kind of just working. How sometimes you just, how did that even happen? How did I even meet that person to talk about, who had that information that I needed to help me, understand that relationship better, or make that business deal, or, whatever it is. That's kind of what I would term as something working well, and also, finding the flow of something. And the second thing I do, so after I've done that reflection, and that's a really good space to then project ahead. So, what things do you want to work on, or what things do you want to achieve in the new year? So, perhaps setting some goals that are quantifiable. So, I actually set measures on them. So you want to achieve a certain, if it's in business, you want to achieve a certain people who are subscribing to your website, or
also get specific.
Get really specific, and also talk about those in present tense, so as if you have those things.
So it's like an affirmation.
Like an affirmation, yeah, because it's training your brain to start to think about, come from a place of abundance, so already see that you have that. Because the thing is, everything's always already in potential. Everything in the world is already in potential. It's just, and you have an incredible capacity to bring to fruition whatever it is that you desire. But it's about activating that, and setting that goal, and then, okay, from that goal, what are the action steps that you then need to figure out, working backwards to achieve it. It's not simply just write something in present tense and the law of attraction will bring it to you. It needs to be broken down into, okay, well, if I want to, like for me, I want to replace, it's pretty audacious, but I'd love to replace my employment income with my business's income by June. So I can't just write that and that's going to happen. Sure, I'll get opportunities, and it's funny, I already work out, as soon as I crystallized that, I was seeing more and more opportunities to do that. But I still need to work backwards, because for that to be sustainable, there has to be some kind of action plan to achieve it, But even just having some of those, big goals there, the more that you think about them, the less unachievable they're going to feel, because the more they're in your present reality. So that's sort of one thing that I've done. That's a bit more detailed. But then the other one that kind of governs everything was this idea of choosing a word for the year. So a word for the year is kind of like what you want to achieve for the year, but also how you want to govern yourself, or how you want to kind of help govern your decision making. So for me, 2015 was gratitude. I really wanted to cultivate that sense of gratitude for everything. So even in the challenges or the obstacles, what wisdom was there for me in that? How could I see that as on my way, to where I wanted to go, as opposed to it being in my way, and how could I turn it around from a negative into a somewhat of a positive, and then be grateful for it happening. So that was something that I was really working on last year, and I think that's a constant practice. I don't think that ever goes away. But this year, I've chosen two words, and they're clarity and action. So clarity on sort of my vision and what I want and who I am, right? Because ultimately we're all just trying to get to know ourselves better. We're all just trying to peel back the layers of conditioning and subordination that we've built up over our lives to get to our truth. And so clarity is the word that I've chosen to help me do that. And then the other one is action. So I think that naturally we can want to hold off doing things until they're perfect, or until, you know, it's just the right time, but there it never really is a right time, and you never really get to perfect, because if and when you'll still want to perfect things. So that's the other word I've chosen, is action, for that reason, to just remind myself wherever I'm at to do something towards action, to put that in practice. So yeah.
I love that.
It's powerful. And I think that it's powerful in its simplicity, because it can get, and you know, I know that I've got other goals in it, but I'm doing that as part of a bit of a course. So I'm having my hand held through that. And you almost need to be accountable to those more bigger things. But I love the idea of choosing a word, or choosing a couple of words, because they can kind of be the framework that you use to build your life, you know, build your year on.
And that you would always keep reflecting on them.
Yeah.
And if they're always in your consciousness and you're thinking about them, then that's going to be a vibration that you...
That's it.
I don't know, attain and vibrate out, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I know a lot of people, you know, might have more kind of ritual around this stuff, or, you know, some people might have some ceremony that they do to let go of a year. I haven't quite got there, but I just think it's a really beautiful time to, you know, especially that, you know, the magic of Christmas and that the sense of renewal that you get from a new year. It's just a beautiful time to take stock. I know a friend of mine, they actually do it with their whole family. So they sit down with the family, even like the little kids, and talk about what they each want to do for the year ahead, which I think is really lovely, because then it's
really lovely.
You know, it's a group decision, you know, where everyone can understand what everybody else in the family wants to achieve individually, and then they all come in and see, okay, well, what do we want collectively, and how can we all sort of work together so that our needs get met and our goals get met. I think it's really beautiful.
It really is, and bringing that consciousness to your children as well.
Yeah.
It's a big tool.
Absolutely, because I think, you know, we pretty much, by default, we grow up not thinking that we can design our lives. You know, we grow up just thinking that it's all decided for us. And I think growing up with that sense of that you can create your future is a real gift to kids, isn't it?
So maybe from here we could actually do personal stories, British.
Yeah.
So let's make it a little bit more, personal. So when we think about using the tools that you've just described, which I am loving, if you're reflecting back on 2015, what was it that worked really well for you?
Gosh, there's a lot of things. There's a common thread that I identified, and a lot of little things, but I think probably the most powerful one was seeing how really understanding fertility and understanding how it wasn't something that I was lacking, but that it was just in the form that I wasn't expecting it. You know, like I really judged myself a lot on not having a period and being less of a woman as a result of that. But when I really started to look at where that energy was going, it was absolutely exploding in business inspiration and life inspiration. And once I was able to see where that was and do all this work with the podcast, you know, do this work around nurturing the divine feminine and talking about sensuality and all these things that, you know, I probably had some blocks around. There's no doubt about it. You know, the beautiful, fortuitous synchronicity of being on stage at the Wellness Summit last August and amazingly getting my period that day. That was profound, you know, because for me...
And the first period in how long?
The first period in... How long was it? Well, Hugo was 2.5, so like 3 years. That was massive, you know, and it was a really, like, it just proved to me the power of going inwards and doing the work and connecting with what moves you and following a path that's inspiring and giving back, like, you know, using my story and using what I know to somehow share that in a way that might resonate with other people, which is really, and the vulnerability, like willing to be vulnerable in that.
Yeah. You were getting up on stage to talk about the divine feminine.
I was.
You know,
it was just so amazing. It was so amazing. And I think once that happened and I could see my own capacity to create that, you know, to make that happen and to direct, you know, my fertility, I keep coming back to that word, but direct that in the form that I wanted it. It just really showed to me the power that we all have when we really focus on what we want and what we want, and but not in a sense that we're lacking something. You know, it wasn't that I was yearning for that. Like, once I'd already seen that I had it, but just not in that way, I instead then focused on doing the work to bring it, but not in a way that was at all like grieving it, if you know what I mean. It was really just, this is where I'm at. This is what I want to do to awaken that part of myself more. And then that just came. So I think that was really probably a big moment for me.
So then when you're thinking about New Year and building on the stuff that works, what do you think about when you're reflecting on what was so good in 2015?
I think it's trusting the divine timing of things and the connections that you make when you're being conscious. You know, I had some amazing experiences last year in terms of growing my business and with the Suburban Sandcastles events and just the different amazing connections that I was able to make, you know, and going from, you know, being at the beginning of the year and feeling like I was a nobody and who was I to kind of have these businesses alongside, feeling like I almost owed them something for being on board something that I'd created, to seeing myself as much more of an equal, you know, who had something to offer. You know, that was an enormous growth trajectory to have in 12 months, because that involved, like, me proving to myself that I wasn't all those things that I'd told myself growing up, you know, that in fact I was enough, you know. And that was enormous, because I think that so much of my conditioning was, you know, to shrink and to, if I just don't say anything, then maybe nobody will notice that I'm not, you know, that I'm here, you know, and that would be my default if I felt anxious or uncomfortable in a situation. Whereas last year was really about stepping past that, you know, into that space of being uncomfortable and being vulnerable, but being open to knowing that, you know, I'm going to be supported and challenged equally with whatever direction this takes. So I'm going to chuck myself way out of my comfort zone, you know, in that process. That
feel the fear and do it anyway thing.
Yeah, I guess that's what it was. Yeah, and then the more I did that, the more it became normal, and the less I would even have, like, you know, a physiological reaction to something. It just wasn't there anymore, because I'd changed my way of being with something.
You changed your neurological wiring, really.
Yeah, pretty much did, yeah.
Yeah.
Through experience.
Yeah.
Through intention and experience.
So it's the intention, isn't it?
Yeah.
Intentionally meeting an experience.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, even the fact that we got up in front of 700 people.
Oh, God.
You know, that required so much of, you know, like, feeling that fear and just doing it.
It's true.
You know, if we had have entertained any, you know, particularly in my case, past public speaking fears, you know, I would have been immobilized. I wouldn't have been able to get up. You know, so it was really about consciously choosing, no, we're doing this and we're going to do a great job and be open to however it plays out. And thankfully, I think we did okay. Yeah, so that's probably, there's some of my big things. And so taking that into the new year, trusting to, you know, live even more wholeheartedly and more vulnerably. I think sometimes that we can shield ourselves from, you know, leaping into things for fear of what if it doesn't work out, or for fear of the repercussions of being vulnerable. But the truth is, everything's always changing, and we're always going to experience loss, whatever, in some form, all the time. And so it's about feeling into that, what those fears are, and developing that willingness to just go there anyway, to choose to live each day in the most wholehearted way that I can. And that's really what I want to do for the year ahead.
I love that.
Mm.
Gosh, it is. The more I think about vulnerability, the more you realise what an enormous leap it is.
Mm. It is.
Yeah.
It's what we all put a wall up, I think, naturally, to vulnerability. But that's the meeting place for connection, and it's the meeting place for, you know, awakening our greatest healing and awakening our most authentic self. Because when you can be willing to be vulnerable, then you give yourself permission to be your most authentic version of you.
Which is when you then move forwards into life purpose, soul
Yeah.
purpose. So true.
Mm. What about you?
Well, I think I said to you before, when I think about 2015 and what really worked for me, I made the enormous leap of being stay-at-home mum, thinking, what am I doing with my life? To, oh my God, I know what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah. I remember that. I think we can get back to that podcast. There was a lot of excitement in that podcast.
So for me, starting Nourishing the Mother with you was really the catalyst, which only came off of, which also came off the back of a lot of vulnerability, because you and I had been talking about it for about a year previous to that.
Yeah.
And we decided just to jump in there and see how it goes. And every week we still have those fears coming up. Oh my God, was that too vulnerable? Oh my God, did I just share too much? Oh, you know, it's out there crying on iTunes, you know.
Yeah.
But it is through going through this podcast with you and talking about and peeling back the layers and the discussions and the mental processing that happens in between those discussions that has had the most enormous healing benefit for me. And so I really hope, an awakening, so I really hope that that is what is flowing out into the world of our listeners, because that's what's happening for us here. So I really, really hope that is what is happening for you out there too, because I don't know, how can it not? I don't know.
Yeah, but you're right though, because, you know,
it's been so profound for me to just open up these conversations and then take them more internally within my life and pull them apart more and be more vulnerable and more authentic and require more and more of those processing levels of myself. It has created the moment of, oh my God, that's right, misfit to how all those pieces fit perfectly into what my life trajectory now looks like.
That in fact every single thing that you've ever done was never a mistake. It was actually leading you perfectly to this path.
But I had always seen it as disconnected mistakes. And so that was my biggest moment this year, was when I realised I could do a business that called deeply to my soul and my heart, and that still allowed me to honour my children and my mothering, which was massive, because that for me was a really big conflict. And when I had my third child, there was a whole part of me that mourned the loss of my career identity, because I had a fantastic business then, naturopathic birth, that was just felt so perfect for me and our family. And I had to let that go to have another baby. And so then trying to figure out who I was again was just the hardest thing I'd ever done. I think 2015 was probably pretty hard with that.
But compounded by the fact of the challenge of, you know, your daughter and how much she pushed so many of those buttons for you.
That's exactly right. Now I'm just having epiphany moments. Jesus, 2015 was a massive year.
Yeah.
So when I think about that, really what happened for me in 2015 was I met you really wholeheartedly on this journey, peeled back some really deep layers of vulnerability and authenticity, and allowed myself to start awakening who I was as woman. I mean, this year I really 100% awakened my seductress and what was seducing me within this world, which opened up the pathway of the divine feminine and allowed that creative flow to come back into my life again, as opposed to me feeling too scared and shut off and that I couldn't allow myself to go there. That is the essence of woman, so let's bring that flow in. And that's when the pleasure nutritionist came up, and I realized all of that stuff that I so deeply wanted women to nourish themselves with could actually all come into one center point for me, and to be intentional with my time. So I also in 2015 started getting up early. So either I was swimming at 5:30 or I was up doing some work, and not every morning, I have to say. I'm not as intentionally dedicated as some entrepreneurial mothers that I know that consistently day after day do that. I'm a bit more, well, if my body clock wakes me up, I'm up and I'm doing it. And, you know.
I think trusting that's big too.
Well, I feel like for me it is. If I try and push myself through, not feeling it, I really am resisting being there. As opposed to, and look, to be honest, 5 times out of 7 days, my body wakes me up at that time anyway.
Yeah.
And so then I just get up and do
So
it.
as opposed to turning over and, looking at your clock and going, oh no, that's not enough sleep, instead going, okay, well, there's a reason why I've woken up. I'm going to get up now.
Yes. Yes. And also realising that there is part of me that still goes, oh, I don't want to get up and lie here. But then I so know in my head, my creativity has already switched on. That 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. window for me, as I think it is for you,
is brilliant.
A hugely creative, inspiring time frame. And I often don't get those energy surges at any other point in that day. And so even when I'm lying there in bed resisting getting up, I know there's no point lying there because I'm not getting back to sleep anyway. Because that creative fire has already kicked in. And so it's fitful anyway. So why stay in bed? So anyway, intentional with my time in the mornings, and either I've been exercising by swimming, which I've done out of pleasure, not out of punishment. Or I've been out of pleasure working on a creative aspect. So I tried lots of different things at that time, so to see what was going to work best for me. I couldn't read a book at that time because I just wanted to go back to sleep again. And I couldn't do, X, Y, and Z parts of my business, but the creative aspect.
So the writing.
Yeah, or just even the future planning, the direction, the goal stepping, the social media, all of that stuff that is inspiring is the time frame for me to do that. So that is what I want to build on next year in 2016.
Yeah.
More vulnerability, more stepping into... I've owned so much of my own divine feminine sensuality and sexuality this year that next year I want to build on that by sharing that more outwardly, I think. I want more women to be able to access that. So what worked really well for me was that, and geez, I've forgotten how tough Lola was. Actually, it's funny what you forget, isn't it? Now you've reminded me. She was really tough, but being at a point of realising the challenges and how they serve her has really mediated how I've responded to her, which in turn probably has mediated I don't know.
In terms of like a mother guilt kind of thing,
I think I had always come from an attachment parenting wounded background of wanting to do over what was done to me.
Yeah.
And so my parenting, along the way I'd come across aware parenting, of course, but had vastly come from the point of I'm here to stop my children suffering. And suffering I viewed as anything that could potentially emotionally, psychologically, mentally mess them up.
Yeah.
So from the way I had responded to a scenario that had them out of their comfort zones to, I don't know, crying, an array of things. So I was in almost over service of mediating all 3 of my children's
That's massive.
needs. Yeah, it's really massive actually. And particularly Lola, I probably worked out the other 2 a bit more honestly in 2015, but particularly my 3rd child, who, as you know, with my journey was so precious. And it was the last one. And so I think I was really over-serving. And so then to look at it from the point of view of how did the challenges serve? What are the benefits to me? What are the benefits to her? Those were topics of conversation I'd never come across before until you and I started having them. And it made so much sense to me and fitted so perfectly into and above and beyond aware parenting that it just all slotted into place. And that, I think, really was the catalyst to her really stepping into her own self. Like, she's nowhere near as challenging as she used to be. I mean, she's always going to be a challenging personality, but, I've called that in, haven't I?
It's so interesting though, but it's so much about, you changing your perspective and that whole parenting journey, particularly when they're young, it pulls so many of our own heartstrings that we often don't see the we don't see consciously where we end and they begin. You know, there's so much of 100%. Kind of reparenting ourselves on that we can actually go in, and in trying to soothe them, we're just soothing ourselves. So that's really powerful. That's
like
massive.
when some shitty kid does something to your kid and all of a sudden you're emotionally hugely fired up about it because they've done it to you.
It's you.
Don't mess with my kid.
Yeah, it's you when you're at your child's age, reliving that pain. Wow, that's huge. It's been a huge year for both
it
of
actually
us.
really has now I think about it. So when I think about next year, what do I want? I want fruition. So all of the dreams and like the pleasure nutritionists that I've really just started cementing, I really want to come into fruition. I want to live the fruits of my divine feminine journey from 2015. That's what I want in 2016. And success is what I want. Success, but not success that's necessarily just monetary, but success that says to me, oh, that's right, I've really shifted some big stuff and my life is successful.
Yeah. What I'm doing matters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And I would like to think that, you know, us hashing this out for, you know, our audience is also helping them to reflect on their own successes and their own trajectory, because you know it's that idea, like, you know, the people that you know, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and you know, in this day and age, who you listen to in the podcast also forms part of that tribe. It also forms part of that. So by being exposed to thinking more deeply about this stuff, it opens up your own capacity to do that and your own intention in doing that, which I think is really great.
Oh, 100%. I'm a mad podcaster, as you know.
Yeah.
And I often think, my gosh, what a golden age we're in to have access to people across this globe who have the most phenomenal niches of information that where I just here in my local community, I would never have exposure to.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it?
Isn't it? So 2016, what do you want to leave our listeners with?
I want to offer you your own space to find a little bit of your own clarity. You know, so what's something that would just stretch you that little bit outside your comfort zone, but that you know that if you could achieve would be so enormously inspiring? And sit with that. Because I think, you know, make it your year to take a little leap or a big leap in the direction of something that's really just calling you.
Inspiring. Fruitful for success.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's probably this week's podcast, but we would love to invite you to join us on our next retreat, which is the 5th and 6th of March. We've split it over 2 days because we really felt that it was a lot of content to get through in one day, and we'd love to offer you the chance to integrate some of the work, and it'll just be really, really beautiful just to work through 2 afternoons.
Yes, to gain the information, but then have the time to make it poignant and relevant to your life and your journey, and to sit with and process emotions or blocks that go with that.
Yeah. I think that it'll offer everyone that little bit more.
Yes.
By doing that.
Yes. So, until next week.
Yes, until next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
We hope you enjoyed this Wellness Couch podcast brought to you by Audible. Do you find that you just don't have time to read all the awesome books that you hear mentioned on the Wellness Couch? Well, Audible might just have the answer. Audible is offering the Wellness Couch listeners a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You can get books like Eat Right for Your Blood Type, Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, Paleo Diet for Athletes, or even The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch. Again, that's audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch for your free audiobook.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.